I thought I'd start out by talking about a little story, and I just need a show of hands. Would anyone, you just raise your hand if you remember where you were on September 11th, 2001. It's almost instant, isn't it? Yeah, I remember where I was too. I was in a little town called Burlington, Vermont. At the time, I was CEO and president of a large management training company, and on September 10th, I'd given a speech to a group of CEOs in the investment banking world up on Lake Placid, New York. So the morning of the 11th, I was driving to the Burlington, Vermont International Airport because I was going to catch a 9:30 a.m. United Airlines flight from Burlington to Denver so I could give another speech the next day. I was also an F-16 pilot with the 144th Fighter Wing of the California Air National Guard based in Fresno, California. And in my spare time, believe it or not, I was a United Airlines pilot. So when I got onto that airplane, I poked my head in the cockpit as I traditionally did. I said, "Good morning, Captain. Anthony Bourke, first officer out of San Francisco, California, sitting back in seat 2A, just wanted to say hello." Captain looked back over his shoulders and said, "Hey, welcome aboard, AB. Great to have you. Sit back, relax, make yourself comfortable. Thanks for checking in." I said, "Thank you, sir. Sir, as I was driving in, I heard this strange thing on the radio about some guy that flew his airplane into the side of the World Trade Center. Did you hear anything about that?" He said, "Yeah, that's funny, AB. I heard that same thing." Man, I hope that guy didn't hurt himself. That was it. I went back and sat in my seat. I started reading the newspaper, and about 5 minutes later, the first flight attendant came up to me and said, "First Officer Bourke, the captain would like to see you in the cockpit." I walked up into that cockpit, and as you all know, this is a very small space. It was me, the captain, the first officer, and the first flight attendant. The captain closed the door, and he handed me a piece of official United Airlines communication that had just come through the teletype, and it said, "We've experienced a major catastrophe. We've activated the Emergency Operations Center. Stand by for further words." All of us looked at each other in complete awe, still having no possible idea what was going on. 5 minutes later, we had a ground stop, meaning all flights were canceled. I got out of that airplane. I walked out in the terminal, and I saw on the television monitors what every one of you saw. And my first reaction was probably exactly the same as every one of yours. My gosh, what can I do to help? I immediately picked up my cell phone. I called my squadron commander back in California. I said, "Hey, sir, AB, stuck out here in Burlington, Vermont. Just wondering if I could help." He said, "AB, I don't think you're coming home anytime soon, so I don't know how you're going to help us. But come to think of it, there is an F-16 squadron right on the other side of that field in Burlington. Why don't you call up their squadron commander, see if you can help him?" I hung up with him. I immediately called the squadron commander of the 134th Fighter Squadron in Burlington, Vermont, part of the Vermont Air National Guard. I said, "Hi, sir, Major Anthony Bourke, F-16 pilot with the 144th Fighter Wing out of Fresno, California. Sir, I'm stuck here in Burlington, Vermont, just wondering if I could help." Long silence on the other end of the line. "You're an F-16 pilot?" "Yes, sir." "Do you fly the Block 25? The exact variant of the F-16 we flew in California?" "Yes, sir." "Dude, what size boots do you wear?" He said, "I've just been tasked to fly a CAP, Combat Air Patrol, 24/7 over New York City. I need 12 pilots to do the job, but I've only got 11 here right now. I can't do it without you. Get over here as quick as you can." I jumped in a taxi, went around the field. 15 minutes later, I pulled onto base. I was immediately greeted by a life support crew who gave me new boots, new flight suit, harness, helmet, everything I needed. I was escorted into the squadron where I met the other 11 pilots. We got an intelligence briefing. I then sat down with a brand new wingman. We did our own briefing. And then just a few hours later, I found myself taking off in a jet that I'd never flown, in airspace that I'd never seen, with a wingman who I'd never met, and yet I felt like I'd been doing it for the 100th time. And that is the power of the training and standardization that we have created in the United States Air Force, and that I know you're striving for to a large degree at Papa John's, to create the perfect pizza around the world. And a lot of people have asked me, you know, AB, what was the most impactful time there? And you know, first of all, I tell them, I don't know what it's like in a Papa John's. I assume it's somewhat like the Air Force. When you're brand new in any Air Force squadron, even in stressful times, the new guy usually doesn't get the best deal. And this was no exception, because what they said to me was, hey, AB, great to have you. Thanks so much for helping us out. Here's what we'd like you to do. Why don't you go home and get a little rest? We've got a hotel room all set up for you. And if you would come back at midnight, we would like you to work the midnight until noon shift. And the way that's going to work is you're going to come in at midnight, you're going to hang your gear on a fully loaded jet, and you'll be on alert from midnight until 5 a.m. An alert is a lot like being a fireman, so your gear is ready to go. If the horn blows, you need to scramble. That means you need to put on your gear, jump in the jet, start engines, and get airborne in 5 minutes or less and intercept whatever the threat is. So I was on alert from midnight until 5 a.m., and at 5 a.m. my wingman and I would brief up. We'd take off at 5:30. We'd take a left turn down the Hudson River. We'd arrive over New York City at 6 a.m., and we had the 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. cap every day over New York City. And of course, we had an air refueling tanker flying above us, so it was very easy to air refuel. And certainly the morning of September 11th was very impactful for me, but what really hit me the hardest, I think, was Wednesday morning, September 12th. A crystal clear, beautiful morning at 9 a.m., flying over what is arguably the greatest and most important city in the world. And I sat there looking down on New York City at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, and there were no yellow taxis going up and down the street. There were no cars coming over the bridges. There were no airplanes flying in the skies. All of those were parked on the jetways and taxiways of New York's JFK, LaGuardia, and Newark Airport. There were no boats going up and down the Hudson River. All there was a big smoking hole over the south end of Manhattan and a gray pallor all the way into New Jersey. And I looked down on that situation and I said to myself, my gosh, we have definitely lost the battle. But we are definitely going to win this war. And I also think it's an incredible testimony to the men and women in uniform and all the federal agencies in this country and around the world that have fought this war on terrorism so effectively. The fact that we have not had a major terrorist attack in this country in 13 years since that time is truly remarkable. So hats off to those folks. But I got to tell you, as franchisees, as owners and operators in this room, I think there was something similar going on in my mind at that time and what probably goes on in your mind every single day or every single week running your business. And that was, I felt like every single day I came into the squadron, whether it was the week after 9/11 in New York or the 9 months back in California when I got back in to my home squadron and I was flying Homeland Defense missions every single day, really 7 days a week over San Francisco, over LA, over nuclear power plants, over all kinds of high interest targets. And it felt like every day I came into my squadron, the one thing that was constant was change. Truly, every day I'd come in, there was some new intelligence briefing about some new threat, about some new possible tactic that we needed to use to overcome these threats. And there was always some new ROE, or rules of engagement, that I didn't always necessarily like or agree with, but I needed to embrace if I was going to get on board with the rest of the Air Force and we were going to fly in formation. And folks, I got to tell you, a lot of those ROE had to do with how I was going to shoot down a U.S. carrier like United Airlines over the skies of my own country with U.S. citizens in it. It wasn't all fun stuff. So I needed to figure out, how could I bring sanity to what otherwise felt like an insane world? And that's really what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about this idea of leading and executing at Mach 2.